Right, what's up? Let's see, we have, make sure this is working. Looks like it's working. Now, this is an impromptu live thing that I'm doing. Hey, JMS Aviator, I'm doing well. Thanks for joining this. This is an impromptu one. I really didn't schedule it, but I was like, you know what? I do have the time. I have the capacity to do this, and I always like to come on here once in a while to catch up with you all. Hope you're doing well, wherever you are. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you may be. Just trying to finish up something here. But yeah, I try to do this Q&A once in a while. So if you're joining, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my abilities. I really didn't have anything planned for this live session, but I think it's always important to come on just to, show my face and show what it's like to get help, in different ways possible, whether it's just answering your questions. So feel free to ask questions and I'll try to answer them. And of course, if you are, let's see, depending on where you're from, I would like to know where you are in the chat. Location, that would be great. Let me actually send a message here. So if you can share your location in the chat, where you're from, that would be good. I'm trying to finish something here. Just a second. Yes. All right. Yeah, let me know where you're from in the chat. That would be great. Let me know if you have any questions. Like I said, I really didn't plan anything for this live. The goal is just to come and hang out with you guys. Since I do have the time, and I think I can, talk about different things going on, of course, in aviation. Drake, hi, sir. I'm preparing for a cadet program. So for the interview, what are the most expected questions and what are the answers to that? So when it comes to interviews, it all depends on the question, of course, but also depends on how you respond, right? So it's hard to give you recommendations based on an interview over YouTube, because, for example, if I were to ask you, why do you want to be a pilot, right? I don't know what your response would be, but what I can tell you is, of course, you should think about a big deal on, things like your motivation, things like the things you have done, right? The things that shows that you are competent and you're able to achieve that. So, like I said, it can be hard to give you exactly the type of questions, because of course the question is, what cadet program are you even preparing for? That would also determine the style of questions you may get. But generally speaking, a big part of any cadet scheme is always knowing why you want to be a pilot. Why did you apply to the program? What do you know about the airline, if it's an airline? What have you done to be able to become a pilot, right? So whether any activities you've done, right? Whether it's trying to get your PPL, or going on a discovery flight, or if it's just as simple as spending time with mentors who are into aviation. Those things do matter, because at the end of the day, it shows that you are motivated to become one. And that can be part of the things you say in an interview, depending on the question and depending on the context in which a question is asked. So I hope that makes sense, right? So it all depends. And again, there's tons of questions you can be asked in an interview, right? But I always drive everything. I always say that you go back to your competencies, you go back to pilot competencies, know a lot of those, and know how to apply them, or how you've applied them in the past, and of course how you can apply them even in any context you're asked. So sometimes, they might give you a scenario, they might ask you a question about what you will do, right? Those are things that will require you to answer based on those competencies. And if you do not understand those competencies really well, then it's going to be obvious and evident that you don't know much of those. All right. Let's see, from CH3. Let's see here. How hard are the tests to be accepted onto a cadet scheme or an integrated ATPL at a flight school? Best things to study and practice. How hard? So most of those tests, surprisingly, are not usually that hard. When I say that hard, if you've practiced recently, especially when it comes to things like, the verbal reasoning, numerical reasoning, you have some of those, what we call psychometric tests as well, that you may have to do. But those things there are resources online. There's nothing new in any of them. Most of the time, they're actually very repetitive as well. So if you are in a situation where you're preparing for a cadet scheme, right, I always recommend PASS every time. If you check the link below, you see PASS link there. They do offer a lot of programs. And the goal here is that you practice with those to gain some insight, right, into like what some of those tests will be like. And evidently, in the past years and many years that this program has existed, you realize that some of those things are very repetitive. So that means some of the tests you take are things that you would have practiced on things like PASS, for example. So the other thing that you can do would be like your math practice, right? Those are very important. And the reason is because, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? Physics, for example, right? Some of the basic stuff, high school math, high school physics, right? Those are things that you tend to lose over time because, maybe you've been out of education for a while. And if you don't practice it, you forget it. So what you want to do is, before you take any of those assessments, you want to spend some time kind of refreshing your memory and your knowledge about them, so that way when you show up to the assessment, you have some idea what you're doing, And best things to study, at the end of the day, I would say, one, study the materials from the source. So if the airline or if the cadet scheme offers some things like resources that you could use, I would say use the source to prepare. Then, of course, expand from there. Don't just use the source, because sometimes the source only provides you very limited information. And a resource like here, like, being part of this YouTube community, and watching some of the videos that I share, I think you definitely get an insight into some of the programs. And then practice is just set a routine that makes sure that prepares you for what you're trying to do. Your routine should, it's funny, I was thinking about this, was it this morning? And I was telling myself, a lot of times we are very passionate about something. Okay, so maybe you want to be a pilot, right? Which in this case you probably want to be. You're probably passionate about that subject of flying, aviation, and the likes, but your motivation, right, is really what is tested along the way. Because your motivation is like, think about it, it's a feeling that doing those over time, whether you're facing challenges, then when you're challenged, your motivation may drop. Whereas if you set a routine, okay, that helps you to maybe manage your motivation, your energy, if I will call it that, you are able to stretch out, yourself in terms of preparing, making sure you adequately prepare for whatever assessment you have to take, giving yourself time to not burn out, right? Because that's how you can maintain a somewhat high level of motivation all through. And it is something that you always need. I'm always having to sometimes you have to challenge yourself and say, you know what, hey, you got to do what you have to do. It might be difficult, it might not be easy, but you challenge yourself to step up to do it. Otherwise, you might not get what you want. And the same thing applies to practicing. All right. Andrew, hello, Stephen. Can you recommend any materials I can use for assessment preparation? I just covered that as well. Depending on the program you're preparing for, have you heard about PASS, pilotassessment.com? There's a link below. I think there's a referral code as well there if you want to use that. That's what I've used in the past. That's what I would recommend. And I think you should do well. At the end of the day, remember, there's no guarantees that any of these programs will the accuracy all depends on the program you're preparing for and how well you have also used the practice sessions that they give you, right? So there's so many programs out there. But one thing I can say is, what I know about PASS, for example, is it's usually updated regularly. So that helps. And that means that you're not using outdated information to prepare, Let's see. Thank you so much. I'm actually going to apply by May. And I am now going to IELTS. Okay, exam. I see your videos. Love the videos. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Like I said, the goal of this is to just talk about what's going on. If you need help with anything, let me know. Currently, I've been working on something that is, I don't know if it's going to work out, but I hope it's a good resource for people who are going through specific cadet programs. So yeah, I'm kind of excited about that. Let me see. Actually, let me try it on my computer here. And let's see, QA Cadet Fellow Program. And so will they open for QA? Is that Qantas, right? Qantas Airlines? I honestly don't know much about the opening dates and how often they run the program. I believe Drake, is that Qantas, right? Let me actually look at something. Qantas Airways, yep, that's right. Oh, Qatar. I said Qantas. I guess it's Qantas too, actually. Yeah, I have no idea. Especially with all the stuff going on out there, I have no idea, unfortunately. I'm actually trying to see if there's anything online on there. Now, I want to believe that you qualify for this program, right? Because from what I remember about the program, you have to have, be a Qatari national. So I hope you meet that requirement, because a lot of times people would ask, oh, they're maybe in India or something, right? And they want to apply to the program, when in reality, you might not be able to apply because of just that requirement. Yeah, I actually have it right here. Let me put it on the screen. Let's see, video capture. Here. Why is it? Something isn't right. Yeah. So yeah, this is the requirement I was talking about. All right. Do you meet that requirement? Oh yeah, go ahead. Mohammed, I believe that's it. Yeah, Mohammed. Yeah, go ahead. Andrew, yeah, most of the time you can always apply after you get selected. You don't have to now. So depending on where you are, I know that some regions it takes a while to get your class one, right? So some people try to be up, kind of get ahead of that than try to get your class one because you have to schedule the appointment, and sometimes it takes maybe 6 months, for example. And for that reason, some people, you don't have to do this. Just so you know, some people just try to stay ahead by getting the class one done even before the cadet scheme is open or before they get selected. Now the issue with that is, of course, you're taking a chance that you get selected, because what if things don't go your way and then you don't get selected? That means the class one may expire by the time the cadet runs again. So just to let you know, you don't have to have it. All right, you don't have to have it to apply. You only need to be able to get it. All right, you can see what it says here. For example, like this cadet scheme, it says be medically fit and be able to obtain the Qatar Civil Aviation, KCUA Class 1 medical. So, right, so you just have to be able to obtain it. It's obvious that they say that, right? Because if you go through all the process and for some reason maybe you know about a condition that is preparing that would likely prevent you from getting on, then of course you don't want to do that. But otherwise, you can wait until you're selected and then go apply for the class 1 medical. Let's see. What's the best preparation material for the Aeon Cadet assessment test? Yeah, Banda Pass is what I would recommend. I've used it. It works every time, and a lot of people have used this as well. So I would say use Pass, especially for those Aeon Cadet tests. It works great. Check the link in the description below. You see pilotassessment.com. That's what it is. If you apply Steven Aviate, you should get about €5 off, I think, your first subscription, of course. Subsequent ones, you don't get any. All right. By the way, if you guys are watching this, don't forget to drop a like on the video. All right, it goes a long way. I know I didn't schedule this, so obviously not a lot of people are joining, but the best you can do for me is, of course, drop a like and stuff. And of course, engage, right? If you have questions, any question, there's no dumb question. All right. Let's see. So Mohammed, I'm currently looking to get a university degree beside my pilot program. Which field do you recommend me to look for? When it comes to getting your degree, it's based on your interest. Nowadays, it's hard to really give recommendations, honestly. I've thought about, back in the days, right? And when I say back in the days, I'm talking about, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, everybody wants to go into IT, but as we have seen with AI, IT has kind of really eradicated or at least limited the opportunities in that field. So IT may not be as lucrative. I'm not saying it's not, I'm just saying that the opportunities there might be limited, right? Especially as these technologies improve. So my advice for you would be to look at your interest, because your interest is what would really sustain you even when things are not going well. When let's say you go into IT because you want to make money, right? If IT is not going well, you're most likely going to give up, right? And quit that field. Same thing with even aviation. If you're trying to come into aviation because of the money, guess what? You may not, if you go through training and things are not going well, you're likely to drop off as well, right? Because the passion or the motivation is not really there. On the other hand, if it's something that you are truly maybe interested in, then even with the challenges that come your way, you're able to overcome them and stay grounded. So my advice is, look for something that is preferably, in my opinion, can be outside of aviation, but also is something that you're interested in. That way you have the two. You have your aviation stuff going, and of course you have your other interests, with good education to support it. And that's something I would recommend. Okay. Let's see. Greetings, Stephen. Please, can you draw an oversight on choosing to go for an airline MPL compared to PPL on a personal level to climb stages up to ATPL? Yeah. So, Azizin or whatever, Aziz, I think that's what it is, right? Maybe that's for your name. But anyway, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. When it comes to going on an MPL program, all right, choosing to go for an airline MPL program, first question I have is this a sponsored MPL, or are you having to pay for this MPL program? My guess is you are paying for the MPL program. But when it comes to the comparison between an MPL and you going through the, your own integrated route of, you're going through PPL, sponsoring your way all through, the main advantage of MPL in this case, in this scenario, assuming my assumptions are correct, the advantage of the MPL is that, generally speaking, you have a job, some form of a job opportunity at the end of it, because the airline, you're trained with the airline procedure. So when you're done with it, you can be brought on by the airline. The disadvantage of MPL is that you are somewhat tied to that airline until you are able to remove the restriction. And that's when you reach about 1500, you get your full ATPL, then you can kind of switch out of the MPL restriction. So there's that to consider. On the other hand, with the PPL, you have the ability to just, go your own route, PPL, CPL, get your frozen ATPL, and you can be picked up by any airline. So if you are in Europe, which is what I'm guessing, right, where there's a lot of MPL programs, and there's a good record of those airlines, the airline that you're going to do your MPL at, or the MPL training you're going through, if there's a good record that the airline hires their candidates, I would say there's nothing wrong with it, right? On the other hand, if you have doubts or you have concerns about the airline hiring their candidates after going through the MPL program, then of course I would say that you leave yourself more options by going through the PPL, ATPL route. That way you're not restricted in any way. You're welcome, Banda. Let's see. JE1104. Hi, Stephen. Big fan. What type of maths and physics do these programs contain? Absolutely. So, my guess, again, depending on where you are, JE1104, depending on where you are, right? That is important to state, because I know that some regions do have more advanced level math and physics, right? But if you're in Europe, specifically the UK region, then it's generally the GCSE level, secondary school GCSE level math. On the other hand, and actually to mention also, sometimes you have more, depending on the airline as well. That's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, so there's some level to this. Depending on the airline as well, sometimes you have more advanced math, all right, that requires more complex equations and stuff, algebra, with physics as well, maybe more formulas to memorize. But this isn't usually the common theme, all right, but it happens. So what I would say is, depending on the program you're preparing for, you want to do your research, right? I know PASS, for example, has those packages where you can pick for a specific airline, and the idea is that they have some materials that you can reference. The other thing also is that, depending on the airline, they actually do offer some resources. I remember BA is one, right, that offers good resources that are available out there. TUI as well. I remember they offered like a PDF file that had examples, and I don't know if I can find it. If I can find it, I'll pull it up. Let me see. I know TUI didn't run it this year, but the last times they did it, they actually offered some materials, all right? And I'm going to pull up an example if I have it here. Just bear with me. I'm just trying to see if I can find an example for you. Let me share this let me share this one here. This is not the exact one I was looking for. But if you look at this website here, this is SOVA assessment, or SOVA assessment actually. You can take a practice test on here, and then it kind of goes over some, and these are the things that you can let me make sure you guys can see my screen. Okay, and that's good. Yeah, these are the kind of assessments you have here. You have personality questionnaires, right? Now you can't select this one, so when you can't select it, but it's just an example of some of the assessments that exist. Motivation question or questionnaires in this particular one. You have competency questionnaires as well. You have situational judgment tests. Let's see. Yeah, logical reasoning or tests. Okay. Now, like I said, it all goes back to the airline that you want to prepare for. And they will often tell you some of the things you can look into. Okay. Checking accuracy tests. These are all examples of some of the tests. Not all airline would have all of this. Sometimes they do have a mix of them, all right? But big fan, what are math and physics to this programs contain? Let me try to see if I can find that other one to answer your question about the math and physics, all right? Let me see if I can find it. I know I usually do have some of these things hanging around. It all just always depends on I'm actually surprised I can't find it. I cannot find it. Okay, so here's another one. Let me share my screen here. This is not the exact one I'm looking for as well, just so you know. But this one has, let's see, 5,120 questions. Numerical reasoning, let's see. Let me click free test to see what this is saying. Yeah, I have to log in. I don't want to do that. Yeah, this is another website that offers some of those tests that you can practice with. Of course, you always have to either buy. Honestly, I don't know much about this website, but I just know it's one of the resources out there that you can always look into. But let's see. Let me see. So these are the kind of tests, you know, this explains it. It doesn't really show you an example. Let me see if it has an example here. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't really show an example, but if you read, pretty much read through this, it tells you like the kind of the structure of some of the tests, right? And this is more for the numerical reasoning tests. There are some that I wish I had. I would have to look for that. There's a PDF file. I can't find it right now, that has good examples. This was from, I believe, was TUI back like in 2023. They actually had different examples of the type of math. And I remember it, or was it Aer Lingus? Actually, maybe it's Aer Lingus. Let me see. No, not this one. No, it's not. Yeah, I can't find it. Yeah, unfortunately, I can't find it. The PDF file here. Hey, Flying Matt, I'm doing well. Thanks for joining. Thanks for asking as well. Let's see. Abdurraham, what do you think of Air Arabia and Fly Dubai MPL, given that both are too expensive? Cost reaches up to 200,000. Oof. Yeah, that's expensive. Honestly, that's really expensive. Instead of doing that, why don't you just come and train then, right? Go train in Spain, or go train in the US if possible, and you paid maybe half of that at a flight school. So that's what I think. I honestly don't think I would want to spend, that $200,000 on an MPL program, knowing that you're also going to be somewhat limited, right? Limited to at least restricted to the airline for some time. So yeah, 200,000 is definitely high in my opinion. Now, of course, if they guarantee that there's a job with it, it's still a lot of money. Honestly, I don't know if it's. Yeah, I can't speak to it honestly. It's a lot of money. It is a lot of money. Andrew, yeah, I've actually shared some of this in different videos, but my story is, I guess, the short and simple of it was, I got interested in aviation at a very young age. I was about 5 years old, and went on to start my training in this was 2010, right? So I finished my high school, finished my college, and then went on to start flight training after college. And, took about 2.5 years. And then I started started instructing at the flight school. And that took about 3 years or so. Joined the airline in 2016, the regional. I was there for about 4 or 5 years in total. And then I joined United Airlines, and then with FedEx. So that's really been my progression. All right. Of course, at the regional, I became a captain. Then once you leave in this part of the world, you kind of have to start again and then make your way up. So currently, I'm a first officer anyway. So I hope that breaks it down. Like, I know that's not a sweet briefing of it, or sweet brief of it, but it's just the summary of it. Yep. Okay, you're in the UK. Awesome. See, Flavy something. All right. Is there not a way to negotiate how to pay the flight schools, for example, in installments, or does it have to be paid all up front? Usually you can. They don't most of the time. All right. Most of the time, most flight schools do not expect you to pay everything all upfront. However, there are some schools that would try to incentivize you paying everything up front. And if you check my most recent video, I actually shared in that video the reasons why you want to avoid paying everything up front. The reason is because unless you are very, very familiar with flight school and you know their financial status, right, and you know that they're stable, you know things are going well with them, I always discourage people from paying a lump sum, a huge lump sum, right, towards the school, because some of these flight schools, depending on where you are, may not be financially stable, which means if for any reason something goes wrong in their finances and they shut down, guess what? It takes a while for you to get your money back. And because your money is tied to them, you may not be able to get that money back for some time, until only God knows. And sometimes you may not get the money back. So my advice is it's best you do installments. And like I said, most flight schools will let you do that. They don't expect you to have $200,000 or $100,000 of cash to pay, right, all at once. So that's what I would say. The other thing also is, depending on where you are, you have the ability to do like a modular training where you pay as you go. If you think about it, you pay, okay, if you have $1,000 today, you go to the school, you meet with an instructor. And now there's some pros and cons to that. I'll be honest, if you only have a few, hundreds or thousands of dollars to start, the issue is that you end up spending, that $1,000 or $2,000. You only get maybe 5 hours of flight training out of it, and then you're on the ground again for maybe months, right? So, and that just creates this cycle of fly, you're grounded, fly, you're grounded. And if there's a lot of time between the intervals of your recency, what will happen is that you end up spending so much money over the years and you get little progress. When it comes to training, you have to be very consistent, because the repetition is what helps you build the skill. If you don't fly for some time, you lose the proficiency and it will cost you more money in the long run. So that is my advice. So if you want to do installments, absolutely, that's what I recommend, but make sure that it's a very consistent installment payment. So that means before you sign up at the school, you look at your finances and see, okay, I can make, let's say, $2,000. If dollars is your currency, for example, I can make $2,000 monthly, or I can make $2,000 every, however, what the frequency is for you. As long as that can be consistent, so that way you can plan with the instructor you're working with and say, okay, I can do 2 to 3 flights a week, which on the low end, that's what you want, 2 to 3 flights a week. So in 7 days, you want to at least, especially during when you're on the initial onset of training, you want to have at least 2 to 3 flights and have them consistently. That way, let's say you do a flight today, you have time, maybe next 2 days, you do another flight. Next 2 days, you do another flight. In a week, you do about 3 flights. That way, that repetition and the muscle memory can be built, the skills can be built, and you're able to retain. Otherwise, if you do 1 flight this week and you go 1 week or 2 weeks not flying and you come back again, guess what? You're repeating most of the stuff that you've learned because there's no repetition, right? Or in this case, the frequency of repetition is very low, and that's not what you want. Let's see. This is from Godisvert. So Godisart. Let's see. Does with a cadet program with an airline get a job after finishing course with 250 hours only? Does with a program you get a job? Okay, so my understanding of the question is, do you get a job after finishing your training with an airline? If it's a cadet program, yes, that is usually the idea, as long as you have good standing. What does that mean? If you go through training, so first of all, there are 2 types of, generally speaking, there are 2 types of cadet programs. There are actually 3 types mainly, all right? The first one are usually the fully sponsored cadet programs where the airline pays for everything, okay? There are some out there. The second one are the partly sponsored. right? Or you just think about it. They sponsor some of the money, they give you maybe half of it, right? Sometimes they do that. And of course, you have the self-sponsored cadet programs where you're going to pay for the training yourself, but what the airline kind of guarantees is a job at the end of it. In all of the cadet programs, the three I've just mentioned, the three types, you would have some form of guarantee, okay, for a job. But the problem, or what could happen to some people, is that even though the airline might guarantee you the job, guess what? If for any reason your training isn't a smooth one, all right, assuming maybe there were problems, there were issues along the way, especially on the self-sponsored or party-sponsored ones. And the reason why I say those are the ones you find that issue, there's a reason for that, okay? But let's just continue with this, right? As long as your training record is good, then generally you don't have a problem. But if you have a very rough path through training, sometimes they don't hire those people, right? And that's why those airlines always state in their contract agreements that they do not guarantee that you get a job or that they will give you a job. They always state that there, because at the end of the day, they don't know what your actual training and performance will be. So if your performance isn't great, that just because you've gone through the cadet scheme for that airline doesn't guarantee that you have a job. Okay. So the reason why I said those two, the partly sponsored and the self-sponsored cadet programs being the ones that mostly have that issue, is because these fully sponsored programs, they are very rigorous in their selection, and they make it such that whoever is getting on has a very high level opportunity or chances of doing well in training. That doesn't mean that some people will not have issues. Don't get me wrong. Of course, there's always going to be a few that may go through it or have issues during training, even on the fully sponsored one. But it limits that chances because the airline is paying for it. Now, don't forget, the airline is paying for it, but you are bonded with the airline for some years. So there's some form of commitment to the airline. Okay. All right, let's see. You're welcome. Hi, Stephen. Just popped in to say hello. I'm 3 weeks away from finishing ground school with SPA. Thanks for your vids. Hope you're doing well. Hey, 9272. Thank you for checking in. How's ground school going? If you're still on, where are you? That's another thing. Are you in the UK right now? Are you in the US? Are you in FTE? Where are you? Let's see, Abdurrahman, do you know anyone who went to Canada as an international student, were able to PGWP and then great question. Let me see, do I know anyone that has gone through that and became an airline pilot in the Canada region? Honestly, no, I don't. I'm not saying that they don't exist, okay, but I don't know anybody who has gone through that route. Okay, Abdurrahman, I know it's not an helpful one, but that's all I can say. I don't know anyone. All right. Hi Stephen, thanks for the videos. I'm 17 and have ADHD and was wondering if that would affect my application on medicals when I go to aviation rules. I appreciate it. Oh, so here's the thing. Most people, even in aviation, just so you know, have ADHD, and honestly, I don't want you to feel like that's a deterrent or a limitation. It is not in any way, and it's not going to prevent you from getting your medical. Now, one thing I will say is, I know that most people, maybe I don't know if you're on any medication and stuff like that, and from what I know, I've never heard anyone being disqualified from getting their medical, even due to an ADHD diagnosis. All right, so that's never been an issue. Okay, and it's not a deterrent that will prevent you from becoming a pilot, just so you know. Okay. All right, I hope that helps. And what do you think of going to Canada as an international student in general? Yeah, so right now, Abdurrahman, one thing I'll say is as an international student in Canada, I know they've changed some of their rules, okay? So I don't exactly know what the new rules are, but I do have a lot of friends that have gone to Canada as an international student and they are there working now. They've gotten their permanent residency and stuff. So in my opinion, it's one of the best places to be as an international student. However, I know that they've made it more strict and they've put in place stringent rules that may make it harder for international students to, you know, kind of transition right into the full, like to become a permanent resident. So my advice is, if you know people, reach out to them. The friends that I know, they went, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, before things changed. So, but I also know that the opportunity there is still there. Yes, all good. The analogy of trying to drink from a fire hose is very appropriate, but definitely doable. I'm UK based, then flight training in Florida for 6 months, followed by 6 months in the UK. Awesome. So your ground school right now is in, I'm guessing is in Florida. Let's see. This is from Paul. Hey Steven, I'm from Mauritius and there's no flight school over here. Do you have suggestions on where I can go for flight training, considering visa and future career opportunities? That's a good question, honestly. So when it comes to flight training, of course, you can go to anywhere, right? So I did my training in the US, and I would always encourage people to come do their training in the US. That's just because that's what I really know well, right? I trained, I became an instructor, so I'm very familiar with the rules, the regulations, and all the stuff in between. But I also know that you don't have to train in the US. You can train in Europe, you can train in South Africa, you can train in, mostly those are the regions I can really recommend. I know Australia is also one, but preferably, I know Europe has some good training schools. I know the US has some good training schools. So if you can afford and find schools in those regions, then why not? I would say, doing your training here in the US especially, I think it's pretty good. Or in Europe, I think it's good as well. Now, with the job aspect, I think the challenge with that is a lot of countries often require that you're a permanent resident. You have, like in the US, you are a permanent resident or you have a green card and all this stuff. So as a student, it becomes very challenging to switch those from a student to a permanent resident, right? There are ways you can do it. I'm not saying there is not possible. Family member filing for you is one. If you have a family member in those regions, a job hiring you is one, but as we know, or as you may know, most countries don't just hire internationals, especially when it comes to aviation. They don't really do that, even in the US as well. So that's not an option or route that I would tell you to kind of rely upon. And I'm thinking of the other route as well. Yeah, that's usually the two common ones: a job filing for you or a family member filing for you. So for that, you have to really think deeply. If your goal is to train in a place and then kind of reside there permanently, just like I've done, just so you know, because that's what I'm from Nigeria, right? I grew up in Nigeria, but I moved to the States, trained, and then became a resident here. Things have changed. So the knowledge and advice that I'll give you now is totally different from what exists at the current moment, because things have just changed. The way the immigration system works has changed as well. So I'll tell you to think critically about it. Okay, I'll tell you to think critically about it, just because I don't want you to go to a place thinking you can get a job once you're done with training and then that doesn't happen. All right. So I'll tell you to just think critically, make sure that you have options. When I say options, that means, okay, if you're unable to maybe reside in the place that you trained, you want to make sure, okay, then if I go back to, let's say, Mauritius, right? You can get a job with an airline around in that region. So, for example, with no training in Mauritius, right? South Africa is definitely the closest to you that I can see here. Then you have maybe Middle East, but their training is expensive out there. That's something I would say. And then Australia on the other side is definitely an option too. I know there's a flight school, I've forgotten the name now. In Adelaide, or if that's how you pronounce it. I know there's a flight school out there as well. So those are the options you have. Now, when it comes to jobs, of course, you can get jobs in Africa, right? So, and mostly anywhere in Africa. I have friends that finished training in the US, went back to, different parts of Africa to get jobs. So there's always an option. You just have to think about it. Let's see. Thanks so much. I think I may have to be off my medication for a while before applying. How do you see the incoming oil shock affect industry for new pilots, cadet schemes? Yeah, so this whole oil, situation, oil prices going up and airlines and stuff, I think that is something that is just like any form of what we call what do you call it now? This geopolitical issues that come up here and there. I think that would always exist. There was a time it was Ukraine and Russia, right? But that didn't really impact oil prices. But still, some aviation industries or some aviation airlines, right, were impacted by that. And now we have this one going on. My guess is it's going to be temporary, right? Hopefully, now there's been a truce in a way that is in place for some time, and maybe this will be it, right? So hopefully it doesn't impact cadet schemes. But if oil prices stay high and airlines are impacted a lot more than what we have seen so far, then of course, airlines may have to dial back on schemes. They might have to cut back on spending and expanding, which means that the industry slows down hiring. And it's kind of slowing down, not because just because of what is going on already. Some airlines are already cutting routes, slashing routes that they fly, and increasing prices. And those are the things that often deter or just prevent people from flying, right? If it's expensive to fly, they won't want to go, which is not good for the airline because they don't make money, and then of course it impacts pilots that way. All right, let's see. Sorry, lack of message. Ground school UK for 6 months, initial flight training. Okay, got it. Final part of flight training back in the UK. Yep. All right, sounds good. All the best in ground school 9272. All right, all the best. I know it's a lot. It goes quickly, all right, because you're so busy and focused on that, but you get through it. It's just keeping your head up, applying those competences, those competences we talk about. You apply them and you do well. How hard is it to take a loan for flight study after I get accepted? It depends on where you are. Okay, if you are in the UK region, from what I've heard, in Europe in general, it's usually more harder, or I would say harder, not more harder. It's harder to get loans in the region over there compared to the US. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying the US is still somewhat hard as well, but I think it's more difficult, okay, in the UK region. So what I would say is it all depends on, the thing is, in order for you to get a loan, the financial institution needs to see that you have the ability to pay it back. And if you don't pay it back, they want to make sure that you have something they can hold on to, so like a collateral. So if you don't have a lot of assets, or maybe your family don't have a lot of, maybe you don't have somebody who has a lot of assets, right, that they're willing to put down, then it can be hard to get a loan. Now, the thing about training is that the reason why a lot of institutions try to avoid providing loans for people is because they believe that what if the person doesn't finish training, or the person is struggling. Now, they don't give you all the money at once as well. They sometimes have to give you some of the money in installments just to manage your progression as well. So that means, let's say you get through PPL, then they say, okay, sure, they give you the next round of funds. Then let's say you finish your CPL, right? Then they give you the next round of funds, right? So they try to make sure that they manage the funds that is disbursed to you, so that they are not giving you $200,000 at once or $100,000 at once, and then everything goes to waste because you didn't make any progress, right? So the point here is, those are the challenges with aviation. It's not like a typical higher institution learning, like a university, where they just tell you, oh, for each semester, this is exactly how much you spend. It doesn't work like that in aviation, unfortunately. So in aviation, they might tell you, oh, you only need to finish with let's say $50,000. But in reality, by the time you start doing all those lessons, and maybe you go on some training flights and things don't go really well, then you have to repeat those lessons. And guess what? That adds to the overall cost of training. All right, let's see. This is for Abdurrahman as well. This is a bit of a personal question, and it's okay if you don't want to talk about it. Why did you go for FedEx from United, even though United is a major airline? Is it because of lifestyle of cargo pilot? So, great question. The main reason was because, how will I explain this? If you were very into like the airlines back, I would say before COVID, right? There was, even till now, right, the airlines have a very unstable type of career progression. And the context behind that is this. If you go back to 2001, with 9/11, and then you go to 2008 with the financial crisis, and we move on to maybe 2012 as well. Like, you see those years that I've just mentioned, right? In the airlines, there was barely any progression. I'm talking about the big three: American, United, Delta. There was barely any progression. Why? Because there was a lot of follows by the airlines. There was a lot of bankruptcies by the airlines. And guess what? UPS, FedEx, even though they were impacted a little bit by those things, but I don't remember them following anybody, right? And they were still able to keep all their pilots on property. So the issues with airlines is that they hire a lot of people, and then think about COVID as well. COVID is a good example. Now, they weren't really impacted during COVID. Why? Because the government bailed them out, gave them a lot of money, literally. So they weren't really impacted. But prior to them receiving those funds from the government, they were already planning to follow a lot of people. Now, if that event had not happened, I probably would have stayed at United. There was nothing wrong with United. I definitely love United, right? There's nothing at all. I probably have stayed there. But at the same time, that event was still fresh on our minds. And even at the time that I was at United, they were still talking about second COVID variant and all this stuff. And they don't know what's going to happen. They don't see this. They don't, so all of that. So mind you, with other airlines, like the cargo industry was doing really well. So they were expanding, they were growing and all that stuff. So logically speaking, you are in a place where you are not sure of what's going to happen in the near term, but you see a place that has a lot of potential based on what was happening at the time. Okay, that's very key to context. Okay, at the time. So I had the opportunity. I'm like, I don't want to, that was really it. So it's not like there was nothing wrong with. Now, in terms of, and another thing to also keep in mind, prior to all of this, right, FedEx had a very, and I hope I don't want like talking about it anyway, but they had a very good, and to an extent, right, they had a very good reputation of just as a business, right? So that's really it, honestly. All right, let's see. Can you guys still hear me, or is it just okay? Something went off there. I don't know what happened. Okay, let me make sure I got this right. Yeah, so the job aspect can be a challenge, all right? And I exactly know what you mean. It can be very difficult to know if it's worth pursuing it, not having a job guaranteed, right? Or ability to become a permanent resident and stuff. So I understand the challenge there. You kind of, and that's the thing about this industry. Sometimes you just have to go by faith, honestly. Because when I started my journey, I didn't have a plan to say this is exactly how it would go, or this is exactly how where I'm going to be. I never had that. It wasn't clear to me, right? But when you start, the next step becomes obvious to you, or reveals itself, and then you take that step, and then the next one reveals itself, and then you take that step, and before you know it, you look back, you've made great stride in the process. But if you don't do anything, because you're worried that you don't know if you're going to get a permanent residency and all that stuff, then no progress is made. You know what I mean? You're just going to be stuck in one place hoping and dreaming for this thing, but you're not pursuing it because of the fact that you don't know what will happen in 5 years. The reality is that you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, right? So my advice to you would be, take the step in front of you. If you have the ability to fund your training, take this step, start the training. As you make progress through the training, the next set of questions you figure them out, right? That's usually how it goes. But if you don't take that step, and you're like, oh, I wish I could do this, but I don't want to do it because I don't know what's going to happen with jobs and all that, then you never know. You never know, right? All right, let's see. What's the average time to get hired by an airline right after flight school? It all depends on region. It all depends on your hours. It all depends on the opportunities you put yourself into. So with an airline, where are you? That's the best. I think that's the first question I'm going to ask you. Is that Babe Castro, right? Where are you? Are you in the US? Are you in the UK region? Are you somewhere else? And the reason why I asked that question is every region has its own process. Okay. Every region has its own process. So it's hard to tell you how long it would take you to get hired. But in the US, for example, once you finish your training, you still have to become, generally speaking, okay, so you're in the US, so you're very familiar with exactly what I'm going to share. So you finish your training, you have to do your CFI, or you don't have to, but generally speaking, you want to do your CFI and II and MEI and all that stuff, right, to get your hours. And once you can get your hours, you become eligible, right, because you have the hours. Now, it doesn't mean that you get hired right away, because it all now comes down to opportunities with those airlines. Now, one thing that I've seen, a trend that I've seen now, is that being part of a cadet scheme, cadet route, right, is one of the things that you can start to tap into depending on what phase you are. Yeah, you don't need a college degree, just so you know. So that's not really a requirement, and it's also not a disadvantage in any way. Okay, so what I would say is you finding, I don't know what phase you are in training already, but let's say you finish your training with 1,500 hours, you don't have a college degree. The next thing I would say is network, right? Try to network as much as you can. Go to those events, the what do you call them now? The hiring events that those airlines hold. Try to be there, try to meet those people, the hiring team, introduce yourself, ask them questions, tell them, show them your resume, right? Let them see that you have, these hours and stuff. And they will tell you what they will tell you what they're looking for. And the rest is just putting yourself out there. Honestly, that is my best advice for you. You don't need a college degree. It's not a requirement. Let's see. Hey, is there an international cadets program which accepts Indian students other than Air Arabia? None that I can mention right now. None that I know of. Okay. None that I know of. I think the one that I have heard about I know Air India, right? Is it India or Indigo? They all have cadet schemes, right? They all have. There's the Indigo. There's another one out there as well. They have cadet schemes. I know they are very difficult to get into, but and also you have to pay. That's another thing. You have to pay for them. So that's something that those are the options for you in that region. However, you have to pay. All right. Let's see, USA. Perfect. Okay, I think I already answered that. You're welcome, Babe Castro. All right, you're welcome. Thanks again for great answer. I'd love to meet you. Would you ever come down to the UK? Yeah, so I've always thought of, honestly, I've always wanted to attend that. Okay. I know there's one coming up in a few weeks, or is it a week or so? But I do come to the UK here and there, not often. But I was there last year, right? Did I go last year? Can't remember. No, I didn't go last year. I didn't. Oh, did I? Jeez, I've actually forgotten all the things I did last year. I think I did last year. I think I did for like, yeah, I did for like 8 days or 9 days or something like that. So I do come around, but of course the timing may not work for like the, those events and stuff, right? Because it's all based on when I'm off and what's going on in my personal life as well. But for now, I'm planning to go to South Africa to do my CPL. All right, yeah, that's good. That is good. Yeah, that's what you can do, right? Do what you can, and once you're done with CPL, maybe start looking for opportunities out in those regions, right? I know it's the key thing that I've seen with most of the, like even in Africa, India, is always the fact that you don't have a lot of programs, cadet schemes. You don't have a lot of airlines as well. So it's always challenging to get into the to get into that flying, professional flying or join the airlines, and it can be very competitive as well. That's what I've seen. But the point here is once you have the qualifications, it becomes you at least you are one step closer. That's the point. Okay, you are one step closer. All right. I just wanted to really come on here. It's been great. For those of you who are joining live right now, I do appreciate all of you. Don't forget to drop a like on this video. Like I said, I do try to do this once in a while. Sometimes it's so random that it all depends on what I have going on, how much time I have, and all that stuff. So I appreciate you all joining. I'm going to have to end this now so that I can do other things. All right, but it's been great. Thank you so much, and have a good night wherever you are. Bye.